has been relatively free of paranormal occurrences, although one morning, at age 8, I experienced the much dreaded sleep paralysis. There is, however, one other story worth mentioning. In 1991, I was a 20-year-old Army corporal stationed in Germany. By this time, I was a graduate of French commando school and was in charge of my own cavalry recon squad, a jeep with 2 other guys. One chilly winter night, my unit was deployed somewhere in southwestern Germany in the wilderness during field exercises. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. Me and my crew spent half the night slinking through the woods, doing the usual cavalry-style patrols. At around 2 a.m., we were told to stop the jeep and set up a listening post in a clump of trees. I decided to be the first watch of the night, while the other 2 guys got some sleep. After about 30 minutes of staring into black nothingness, I decided to get up and walk around a bit. With a weapon in hand and a radio on my back, I began to prowl around the area. Yes, it was unbelievably dark, but at least this was keeping me occupied. Suddenly, a very average night turned into an encounter I will never forget. After several minutes of walking, I suddenly realized how quiet the night was. Not a sound to be heard from an animal or even an insect. Thinking this was a bit strange, I walked a few more paces before realizing I was right in the middle of a very old deserted village. I pulled out my night vision goggles and noticed that the village consisted of about 7 or 8 old stone houses. Only the walls remained, as the old thatched roofs were long gone. Suddenly, I felt this dark, evil presence like a weight on my shoulders. I knew I was being watched by someone or something, and I knew that I was not welcome in this place. I slowly turned around and began walking back the way I came, with every footstep in the tall, dry grass sounding like a firecracker. It was very slow and painful walking out of this place. I consider myself a rational person, but was truly scared as I made the long walk back to the jeep. Needless to say, I spent the rest of the night inside the jeep. As you read the stories on the site, it may be hard to appreciate the feelings others have felt as they try to tell their tales. I promise you, the fear and sixth sense we have felt during these tales are the most important part of the story. Hi, my name's Brooke. I work at an assisted living facility in Pennsylvania. I worked an 11/7 shift, so of course, there are a lot of stories about the place already. But besides that, I was wondering if the experiences I've had, as insignificant as they may seem or be, could be the activities of ghosts, or just my mind. Of course, I'm not the only one that claims to have seen things, but who knows? For instance, I'll just be walking around the building, and I constantly think that I see things, like out of the corner of my eye. It's not a definite thing, it's just a shape. It's either black or white. A lady I work with always sees black when she sees things out of the corner of her eye. As for me, I always see white. The forms are white, that is. Is there a reason she sees black and I see white? And today, for instance, I was walking and I was sure there was someone behind me. When I semi-turned around, out of the corner of my eye, I swore there was a figure for a split second, but it was gone. It scared me to death, actually. That is why I'm writing to you today, because today, that was the closest a form or figure has ever been. No one has ever died in this facility that I work in, but they have died in the hospital. The building has only been open for 4 years, maybe 5. I was just wondering if these could be ghosts, or just my eyes playing tricks on me. A lot of the residents say that they see a woman in white in their room, or sitting on their bed. I don't know how to explain or take that either, but I appreciate your reading. Thanks for listening as well. The story I'm about to tell you happened to me directly and has forever changed my view on the supernatural. I would like to state for the record that I've always been a skeptical person who never believed in anything that couldn't be proven. Before my experience, I didn't believe in ghosts and had never given the topic a second thought. Since that period of time, it has always been on my mind frequently. This is my story. The event in question occurred several years ago at my grandparents' house. I was 19. I'd been out with my friends and returned home around 2 a.m. I retired to my bedroom on the second floor of the house and got into bed. I'd been lying there for 2 or 3 minutes, reflecting on the events of the evening, when suddenly I heard the muffling screaming of a woman coming from the basement. Almost immediately, the screaming began to slowly ascend the stairs, and within a minute had reached the first floor. It continued to ascend the stairs, and 30 seconds later had reached the second floor and was right outside of my room. The screaming was very loud and was clearly that of a woman. My bedroom door was closed, and I could therefore see nothing. The screaming continued outside of my room for approximately 1 minute, and then slowly began to descend the stairs into the basement. When it reached the basement, the screaming ceased, and the house was silent. That is the end of my story. I feel that in order for me to give an objective account of this occurrence, it is important that I detail my own actions and opinions. When I first heard the noise, I recognized that it was coming from the basement, and although it sounded like a woman screaming, I immediately disregarded this as being ridiculous. I started to try and rationalize what I was hearing. However, my analysis ended rather abruptly when I realized that the noise was getting closer. By the time I reached the first floor, it had become quite loud, and being unable to think of any rational explanation for such a noise, I became convinced that the ghost of a woman was ascending the stairs of my grandparents' house. I became completely terrified and quickly sat up in bed, both so that I could hear better and so that I could run, if necessary. When it reached the second floor and was outside my room, every hair in my body was standing on end, and my hands were literally shaking with fear. I was too scared to move, and for that reason, remained stationary until it returned to the basement and the noise subsided. I stayed where I was for several minutes, waiting for the noise to return. When it didn't, I got up, turned on my light, and sat back down on my bed. Being wide awake and in no mood to sleep, I spent the next couple of hours lying in my bed, listening and thinking about what had happened. Eventually I fell asleep, and the next morning, when I woke up, my light was still on, and I was completely convinced that I had heard a ghost. I spent the entire day gathering information and trying to figure out what I had heard. The only other people in the house were my grandparents. My grandmother is a sound sleeper, and my grandfather is hard of hearing. They heard nothing. They bought the house in 1966 and sold it in 2000. During that time, they never heard anything that even remotely resembles what I described. My mother lived in the house for several years in her late teens and never heard anything either. I myself lived in the house on and off for years and never heard anything before, and have not heard anything since. I consider that maybe the pipes or something else in the house made the noise, although I don't think any pipe on earth could have made the noise I heard. I dismiss this theory anyways, because if the house did make odd noises, someone would have heard them in the past 30 years. I also dismiss the wind, because I've spent many windy nights in the house and heard absolutely nothing. In the end, I came to the conclusion that there was no earthly explanation for what I heard, and that what I experienced must have been supernatural. It sounds crazy saying that, but I know what I heard. I will never forget it. I'm sure it was a ghost. In conclusion, I would just like to state that all of my friends think I was asleep and that the whole thing was a dream. I would like to touch on this briefly. The first thing I would like to say is that I know I was not asleep. Here's my case. I've been in bed for 2 or 3 minutes, less than 5 for sure, and was laying on my back thinking. I've always had a difficult time falling asleep. It usually takes me 20 to 30 minutes, and I've never been able to sleep on my back. At the time, I was making no attempt to sleep, but was lying there, thinking. Secondly, no matter how real a dream seems, you always wake up afterwards, and that's how I know you were dreaming. I don't think it's possible to remember a dream without waking up and realize you are dreaming. If it is, it's never happened to me. If it had been a dream, I would have woken up and said, wow, that one was weird. That never happened. I was awake. Thirdly, I turned the light on after the occurrence, and it was still on when I woke up in the morning. I know for a fact that I was awake. That is my story, and I swear to you that every word of it is the truth. I don't know if you will believe me. No one else will, but I swear it's the truth. I am 17 years old. In the past 7 years, I'd lived in 3 different houses, and every one of them had a ghost. The first one we lived in was from 94 to 96. The occurrence that spooked me there happened in my parents' room. A week before anything weird happened, a bunch of knickknacks fell off of my mother's headboard. So, she put it back and pushed it away from the edge. On Easter morning of 95, I was with my brother, sister, and dad, watching TV in the living room. About 20 feet away from my parents' bedroom door, I heard a bang, and my mom came running out of her room. She really wanted to know who was pounding. Apparently, when I heard the bang, all the stuff had fallen off her headboard and kind of flew off this time. Not only that, but this Oreo tin can she had looked like it had been stepped on. After that, our next door neighbor told us that she had seen this old man that lived here before us in the backyard on the day he died in the hospital. Now, the living room looked into a hallway. In the hallway, you could see into my brother's room, and my parents was right next door. The living room had a clear view of my parents' room. One night, my dad fell asleep in the living room. He was sleeping, facing the hallway. He suddenly woke up and looked into his room. He saw this cloud of smoke billowing in the hallway, moving towards his room. He jumped up and yelled fire. When he yelled, my brother woke up and saw this. The cloud settled in the hallway and disappeared. I know this was not any kind of imagination because my brother and my dad are very logical and analytical people, and they both witnessed this. In the next house, it was never anything really. The only occurrence that happened was the night one of our cats died. The cat house was in the corner of my room, and I had a nightlight next to the cat house. I looked up to the top cat house, and I saw the shadow of our dead cat. The cat loved sleeping on the top every night, and this night was no exception. The third house is the house we have lived in for the past 3 years. I believe it all started with the woman. My dad wakes up early in the morning to get ready for work. When this happened, my mom would occasionally fall asleep in the living room. There's a door next to the entryway that leads into the back hallway where all the rooms are. The first room is my brother's, the second is my parents', then you turn, and then comes my sister's room, and lastly, mine. Now, on this morning, my dad woke me up and looked over. He saw the back of a woman and assumed it was my mom. He got up and went out into the living room and saw my mom sleeping on the couch. He went back to his room and no one was there. After that, I had an experience with a man. It was about 4 in the morning and I was suddenly woken up by the feeling of a large man tapping my foot. I looked up and no one was there. I have this ticker stuffed animal that I got for my birthday from my sister. At the time of my next story, my large dog slept in my room with me. He would sleep up against the door, so I couldn't sleepwalk and open it without waking up. I woke up one morning and my ticker was nowhere, so I figured it rolled under the bed. I opened my door and it was laying outside of my door. About a year ago, my mom started sleeping out in the living room for health reasons. The wall our couch leans against is connected to my brother's room. We had a family friend staying in there while my brother was in boot camp. One morning, my mom woke up about 7 a.m. She heard a knocking on the wall between the living room and my brother's room. She thought it was just our friend when it moved to the wall behind her computer about 10 feet away. This is an inside wall and there's no way there could be any knocking. It then moved to the ceiling. She said it sounded like someone knocking. A couple nights later, I heard her banging in my parents' room. Their bathroom is across the hall from my brother's room. My bathroom is across from my sister's room, and the bathtub stalls are back to back. When I heard the banging, it sounded like it was coming from the wall where the shower head is, and they have a lot of shelves over there, so it would be impossible to bang as clearly as I heard. A couple of hours later, I heard shuffling footsteps in the hall coming from the bathroom. On 2 occasions, my dad has seen a streaking white figure that appears to be a cat, but we are not positive. We have also seen shadow people walking in the side yard through our shutters. Not long ago, our next door neighbor told us that the houses in our neighborhood was built on Indian burial ground. We are not sure if this has anything to do with all this. The house we live in now appears to be the most haunted so far. I'm 17 years old, and I used to live in an old house made in 1921 in Haverhill, Massachusetts, that I know is haunted. One day, when I was 10, I was in my upstairs bedroom with my two sisters coloring. I think that's when it started. We were home alone when we heard the closet at the end of the stairs slide open. Then we heard it slide back. The sliding doors of the closet always made a loud rumbling noise when it was open. When we heard it that day, we didn't get scared at first because we thought my mom had gotten home from work, so we ran downstairs to greet her to find that nobody was home. We looked around and then looked outside to see if the car was in the driveway, but we were alone, or so we thought. We ran back upstairs to our room and grabbed shoes and hangers for the so-called protection. Then all of a sudden, we heard footsteps racing up the stairs, then back down. We never saw anything actually reach the top of the stairs, but they ran up and down repeatedly, about 10 times, then it stopped. We were so scared, we just sat there crying, waiting to hear more, but nothing else happened. Then, when I was 15, I was taking care of a dog, and when I brought it to the foot of the stairs, he froze and just stared at the top. I didn't think much about it, so I picked him up and brought him up the stairs to my room and closed the door. The dog then began crying, and he seemed to be getting nervous and uneasy, and he started scratching at the door. When I opened the door to let him out, he ran down the steps so fast that by the time I got out the door, he was gone. After that, many more things started to happen. I woke one morning to hear something or someone dragging themselves on the rug next to my bed. I was so frozen with fear that I didn't even look to see what it was. The cabinets in our kitchen would open and slam shut by themselves. I could also hear the silverware jiggling and slamming inside the drawers. There are even moments where the computer keyboard would also type by itself. I've also had my foot slapped and have felt something sit on me while I was laying in my bed. There are also too many noises and weird things to explain, and also creepy dreams. So I'm glad to be out of that house. Well, I would like to know if the house has some kind of history or if anybody died there. Last year, after we moved out of the house, our cousins were sleeping over and we were talking about our old house. One of my cousins, who slept over our house a lot, asked why our dad always walked up to our room and why he did it over and over without ever coming into our room. We told him about the day we heard the racing footsteps running up the stairs, and she got so freaked out. My other cousin also said she hated sleeping in our room because she always heard those same footsteps coming up the stairs but never making it to the top before it ran back down again. Now in our present house in Orlando, Florida, weird things have suddenly begun to happen. Noises, shadowy figures, and also short wide figures have appeared. I always seem to see something in the corner of my eye. When I turn my head to look, there is nothing there. And my sister felt somebody whistle and blow in her ear. Well, that's all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for reading. Hello, my name is Nikki, and I'm 14 years old. Unfortunately, I don't remember the details to my story very well, because it happened when I was about 4 or 5 years old. But anyway, my family lived in a large house that was actually quite old. One night, I was asleep in my bedroom upstairs, and I awoke in the middle of the night. I went straight across the hall to my brother's room and asked him to come downstairs with me because I was scared and wanted to sleep with Mom and Dad. He asked me why I was so scared, and I said I didn't know. So he came down with me. We started down the stairs, and I froze at the sight of what I saw. There was a little boy at the end of the stairs. Now, this could have been my younger brother, but my brother was just a few months old. This little boy had brown hair and was just sitting at the bottom of the stairs. I wasn't scared, so we kept walking. We got into my parents' room, and I was getting ready to climb in their bed, and all the lights in the house came on at once. My dad woke up and checked the circuit breaker, but nothing was wrong, so he went through the house and shut off all the lights. Well, the next night, I saw the same little boy, and the same thing happened again. This activity continued for a few more days, and my parents checked out some information by the guy that lived there before. He said a little boy around the age of 5 died because he was very sick. He died in the middle of the night in his sleep, and a few hours before he went to sleep, he turned all the lights in the house on because he was afraid of the dark. I've never seen anything since, even though I've moved several times. I always somehow sense when there is an unknown presence around them. I'll always remember that night. I've since been afraid of the dark, though I hate to admit it, but it's not like anyone is going to criticize me for it. Wowzas. I just have to say that honestly, that was the most realistic encounter I've ever heard of a 14-year-old telling a story, honestly. Although honestly, again, 14-year-olds are really intelligent. I've had, people on my channel who are 14 and, comment, and you guys know who you are and you guys are amazing. But the fact that there's always this tendency to embellish and just exaggerate every story. It doesn't matter if you're an adult or a child for that matter. People just like telling extreme stories just so, it gets attention. But that story, I feel like, that's so amazing because it's like you see a presence and it's just really interesting to see that kind of stuff, And it's not over the top. It's not like, missiles flying from the sky and the frickin' ghost boy just jumped up in the air and it was like, here's my fangs and I'm going to kill everybody. It wasn't like that. It was just she saw rather, this, being down the stairs and she thought it was her brother, but apparently it wasn't. It was just a human being. So that is a really cool, neat story. All these stories were really cool, to be honest, but I really like that story. I don't know why. If you guys really like that story, you should tell me too. Comment below. But anyway, and by the way, with the other story about the banging, they heard banging in the rooms, but you know why they heard banging. It's called the birds and the bees, and they were doing a little frisky things, we got a man and a woman, or a man and a man, I guess, or a woman and a woman. I ain't gonna judge, and I don't even say ain't, so I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. I'm actually approaching 11K soon, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys are awesome, and I love delivering content. I love being your narrator. It's just a joy. So, if you guys want to comment, you want to like, you want to share, you can subscribe to. I can't even talk, but I'm not going to edit it out. Go ahead. I'm just sharing the love with you guys, because seriously, guys, no matter what, I'll always stand by you. Well, that sounds, I feel like I'm in a wedding or something. Okay. Anyway, I'll always, cherish your guys' presence, on this platform. That's why I love the comments. But seriously, guys, I always look forward to the comments. I always look forward. Honestly, the number one thing I always want to see is the comments. I don't know. I get a rush when I see comments. When you guys get excited, at that point, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's so satisfying to me. I don't know why, guys, but I think I do, but I just keep saying that for some reason. Anyways, I'm going to cut this short. Enough with the lovey-dovey stuff. This is a horror channel. We got to talk about murder rituals and sacrifice killings and, ghosts and demons and all that. But seriously, guys, I love you guys. Good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.